All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Aaron Farmer, and first of all, I want to just thank everyone for coming in because I know that this is a Pinners Conference, and to be honest with you, I didn't really know what the Pinners Conference was when I decided to do this. And if I had known that it was like for Pinterest stuff, I might not have, have suggested this particular topic because it doesn't really fit with the conference theme. I understand. I'm not going to teach any crafts. I'm not going to teach any DIY today. But by the end of it, you're going to have a very, very good handle on why you gain weight as you get older and what you can do to reverse that process. So I think this is a very important topic because we are in the midst of an obesity epidemic. And just to kind of give you an idea of where I came from, that's me and my wife not too long ago, like 2 years ago. Actually, I don't know when it was, but I was about 400 pounds, and I like to say that I was about 400 pounds because I don't actually know how heavy I was. We had a scale that went up to 400 pounds and then said E, and when I stepped on it, it said E. So it was about 400 pounds, and I could have been heavier, I just don't know. I was in trouble not so much because of my weight, but because of my blood pressure. My blood pressure sat, on a normal day when I was resting, it sat at 200 over 160, and on multiple occasions it spiked up to as high as 236 over 180, which if you don't know anything about blood pressure is like stroke level. I was in trouble. And to make matters worse, high blood pressure issues ran in my family. High blood pressure killed both of my maternal grandparents, and it had a role in the death of both of my paternal grandparents. So I was really playing Russian roulette with my life. But the problem was I didn't know how to fix it. I did what and by the way, Diane was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes about that same time. I was diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. It was a bad time for both of us. But I didn't know how to fix it. So I did the only thing that I knew how to do, which was try to eat less and try to exercise more. I joined a gym. I swam a mile a day, 3 days a week. 3 days a week. I really, did weightlifting, did cardio, did everything I knew how to do in order to lose weight. And nothing worked. The weight just stayed on. I didn't understand what was going on. I was frustrated. One night I watched a documentary called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, which if you're not familiar with that, this is a guy that lost weight by juicing all of his food. And I watched that and I thought, oh wow, that's a great idea. I'll do that. So I had a juicer overnighted to me, and I spent the next month not eating solid food. And I just juiced everything. And you know what? If you don't eat solid food, you lose weight. You really, really do. The only problem was I was so lethargic. I didn't have any energy. I just sat around and stared at the walls. I would take naps every day. In fact, I would go to swim my laps and just barely have enough energy to get to the end of my laps. And in fact, one day, the day that actually ended my little juicing trial was I was swimming and I did my hand over my head to take a lap, and then I didn't have enough energy to move my hand back up over my head to take another stroke forward. It was, do you have a question?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I was like, wow.
So it was, my energy levels were at rock bottom. And while I did lose weight, because if you don't eat solid food, you're going to lose weight, I did not have the energy to live, a life that was fulfilling or anything like that. And so
and it didn't help his blood pressure at all.
And it didn't help my blood pressure at all. My blood pressure was still crazy, crazy high. And it's a medicine-resistant blood pressure. So when I take a blood pressure pill, it might drop my blood pressure 20 points, and that's pushing it. But when you're 80 points high, you might as well not take anything. So I
just want to interrupt really quick.
Sure.
This was at a point, he would go into the doctor just for a checkup, and they would say, you can't leave until we get your blood pressure down.
Yeah.
So they would put him on intravenous meds, trying to bring his blood pressure to a point where they weren't liable for letting him walk out of
Right.
the office.
I was in a bad way. But the juicing didn't work. I couldn't go back to that, and so I didn't know what to do. I was just frustrated, and basically I was just kind of biding my time until I died because I couldn't fix the problem. I didn't have the tools necessary to fix the problem. And then through a series of very fortunate events, a couple things kind of fell into place, and that started me on the road to where I'm now about 150 pounds smaller. I've lost that in about a year and a half. Thank you very much. And I still lose weight at the rate of about 2 to 4 pounds a week. It's very easy to do, and once you get to the end of this lesson, you're going to know exactly how to do it because it's really, really a powerful tool to do it. But let me get there. So a couple things that happened was, well, the first thing that happened, I was late at night, and I was kind of surfing around the internet, and I found an article by a lady named Eva Schaub, and she had decided to go a year without eating sugar. And she was talking about the different things that happened to her body. And she didn't have any weight to lose, but one of the things she mentioned in the article was that can lead to weight loss. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So her ebook was on sale, so right then I bought her ebook and I was reading it. And she mentioned in the ebook a video by a man named Dr. Robert Lustig. So Dr. Robert Lustig is the head of endocrinology in the University of California in San Francisco. And his video is called Sugar, the Bitter Truth. And in this hour-long video, he walks through why he believes that sugar is the source of obesity. And he makes a very compelling case. So now I've got, two people are telling me that sugar is bad. I like to listen to podcasts, and one of the podcasts I listen to, if anybody knows who Pat Flynn is, a fantastic business podcast, but he had a man on named Vinnie Tortorich. Vinnie Tortorich likes to help people lose weight, and the way that he helps people lose weight is he tells them not to eat sugars and grains. So in just a very short amount of time, I had 3 different people say, hey, you know what, if you eat sugar, or if you don't eat sugar, you're going to lose weight. So I thought, you know what, I want to dive in, and I'm not going to eat sugar and see what happens. And so from that point on, I started reading everything. I didn't not eat sugar immediately. What I did do is I started reading every book, listened to every podcast, read every medical journal. I read everything that I could do to try to figure out what it was about sugar that made you gain weight, if that was even true, and what I needed to do to maximize my weight loss. And so over the course of, probably took about 6 months for me to become convinced of the power of not eating sugars and grains and carbs and potatoes and everything, and to begin to not eat that food, and because it drove weight gain. But it took me a lot longer to figure out why. That's what I was interested in, is why. Why does eating sugar drive weight gain? And is there any way to eat sugar and not have it drive weight gain? I like sugar. So I did a lot of research, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing that you need to know is that your way of thinking about how to lose weight is probably wrong. The most common way that people think that what you need to do in order to lose weight is to eat less and exercise more. And that on the surface sounds incredibly logical. And it sounds incredibly logical because we tend to think of ourselves as simple machines, right? If we put 2,000 calories worth of food in our body and we do 2,500 calories worth of work, then we've lost the equivalent of 500 calories of fat. 1 pound of fat is equal to 3,500 calories. So if you do that every day for a week, you're going to lose a pound that week and a pound every week for the rest of your life that you keep that up. It sounds logical. The only problem is that you are not a simple machine. Your body takes tremendous steps in order to remain in a state of what's called homeostasis. So if you do 2,500 calories worth of work, your body's going to do everything that it can do to compel you to consume 2,500 calories worth of food so that your weight stays the same. If you try to cut your food back to 1,500 calories, your body's going to do everything that it can to cut your caloric output for the day to 1,500 calories to match your caloric output. So eating less and exercising more doesn't work because your body's not a simple machine. It works against that type of thinking of just trying to eat less food and trying to exercise more. In fact, let's say that you're a fantastic cook and you're going to cook me a fantastic meal, like the best meal I've ever had, and I'm going to meet you for dinner that night. And I want to make sure that I have a great appetite. Like my appetite is at the highest level so that I can really enjoy the food that you're going to cook. What am I going to do that day? Well, I'm probably not going to eat as much so that, I've got room in my belly and I've got this great appetite. I might even exercise a little more in order to, work up an appetite so that I can really enjoy your food. Well, what have I just done in order to get hungrier? Well, I've ate less and I've exercised more. And that's what happens when you do that. You eat less, you exercise more, and you get hungry. And you just, it's not your fault. It's not a character defect. You're not a glutton and you're not lazy. It's just the way that your body works. If you do more work, it requires more food. If you eat less food, it will make you do less work. That's just the way your body is designed to work. And it's a good thing that your body is designed to work that way, for a couple different reasons. We'll get into that in just a minute. In the 1990s, the National Institute of Health spent $1 billion on what eventually became known as the Women's Health Initiative. They spent $1 billion just to try to figure out what we could do to make people lose weight. So they took 20,000 women, and they put them what on at the time was supposed to be, the way to lose weight, which was a low-fat, high-fiber diet. So, in fact, the reason that we have like light salad dressing and light sour cream and light cheese and light everything at the grocery store today is because we convinced ourselves in the 80s and 90s that the secret to losing weight was to eat not as much fat. So low fat was the way to go. And so we cut the fat for these 20,000 women, and they ate on average 360 calories a day less than on their previous diet. So over time, they tracked the women, and over 8 years' time, these women who were eating on average 360 calories a day less than their previous diet, they lost 2 pounds in the course of 8 years. And here's what's crazy, is their waist circumference got bigger. So what that suggests is that the weight that they lost did not come from their fat. In fact, they gained more fat, but what they lost was lean muscle tissue. Well, if you know anything about your body, that's the exact opposite of what you want to do. You want to lose weight in such a way that it's the fat that gets burned off, but it's the muscle that stays the same, or at least stays the same, if not gets bigger. So if a pound of fat is 3,500 calories, and these women who are eating 360 calories a day less should have lost about 8 pounds in the first 3 weeks. And then they should have lost another 36 pounds every year after that. But even though they were operating at this caloric deficit, the weight never came off. Why is that? It's because eating less and exercising more doesn't work. In fact, you've probably tried this diet. You've probably tried to go on a diet, you've restricted your calories, you've tried to work out more, and it worked for a week or two. You seemed to lose a little bit of weight, and then you hit a plateau, and then you kept going at it because you were determined to lose that weight, and the plateau kept going, until finally you gave up. And then when you gave up, and you went back to your old eating habits, the weight not only came back, but the weight probably came back with a few more of its friends. And you actually ended up at a net gain once the whole thing was over. That is frustrating, but it's also normal. That's what normally happens when people go on a normal diet, which is typically calorie restricted. So let's look at exercise. There was a time when Americans didn't exercise. In fact, there was a time when Americans considered vigorous exercise, this is before the 1970s, when Americans considered vigorous exercise to be detrimental to your health, that it broke down your body. And then all of a sudden the 70s happened, and we were jazzercising and doing Jane Fonda workouts and doing Richard Simmons, and we were wearing spandex, and we were joining gyms, and exercise for the nation was at an all-time high, and what happened? We got fatter. We got fatter as a nation. The obesity epidemic was off and running at that time. So as we did more exercise, and by the way, ate a low-fat diet, because that's what everyone told us to do, is to eat low-fat everything, the obesity rates in America got higher and higher and higher as it went on. And here's the kicker. Every study on exercise that has been done from the 1970s to today has told us one thing over and over, and that one thing is that exercise does not work for weight loss. In 2007, the American Heart Association and the American College of Sports Medicine released a joint set of guidelines on exercise. Their recommendation was 30 minutes of exercise a day, 3 days a week for maintaining health. And here's the money quote. This is the quote that was kind of buried in the recommendations that didn't hit the headlines. It didn't go in all of the newspaper reports that were filed on these recommendations. Here's the quote. It is reasonable to assume that persons with relatively high daily energy expenditures would be less likely to gain weight over time compared with those who have low energy expenditures. So far, data to support this hypothesis is not particularly compelling. So they were admitting right in the recommendations that vigorous exercise doesn't work for weight gain, but it's the only thing we know how to do. I mean, it's really it. I mean, if you're so wedded to the idea that eating less and exercising more is what drives weight loss, it doesn't really matter what the data is, because you're going to cook the data, you're going to look at the data, you're not going to be able to look at it objectively because there's no other answer for the problem on the tables for these people. And it can be very, very frustrating. A few years later, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the International Association for the Study of Obesity, and the International Obesity Task Force released their recommendations, and they suggested that we should be exercising an hour a day, 7 days a week, in order just to maintain the same weight. Where did they get that data? An hour? Well, it was because all the data that studied 30 minutes a day didn't show any significant weight loss. So obviously, the only problem is that you're not exercising enough. So if 30 minutes a day didn't move the needle, then obviously an hour a day would. But you know what? An hour a day of exercise, that doesn't work either. Now, I want to be very clear here. Exercise is a good thing. Exercise is a fantastic thing. It does a lot of really good things for your body. It builds muscle tone. It makes you more insulin sensitive. It increases your cardiovascular capacity. It increases your mood. It improves your mood, and it releases endorphins. You feel better after exercise. So exercise does a lot of really, really good things. So everyone should exercise. However, if your goal to lose weight is to exercise it off, you're just not going to be able to do that unless you can make exercise your full-time job. So if you are blessed to get on The Biggest Loser, where you have the time to exercise 8 to 12 hours a day, and that's just like all you do is vigorous exercise all day, you could probably lose weight that way, because that's what it'll take. That's what it'll take for you to lose weight, is that level of exercise. Well, if you're a normal person and you have a normal life, you're not going to be able to out-exercise your diet. So let's pretend for a minute that you are in charge of a coal plant, right? So you're in charge of a coal plant. This plant burns coal in order to power the little town that's down the river somewhere. And in order to meet the needs of this town, you have to burn 2,000 pounds of coal every day in order to power this town. And every day you get 2,000 pounds of coal delivered to you, and you burn that coal and it powers the town. Now you're a smart plant manager, and you've got a little bit of reserve stacked away for, in case something happens. So you've got some reserve stacked away. But generally, you don't really need to dip into the reserves because you're getting 2,000 pounds a day of coal, and you're putting out 2,000 pounds of coal worth of work to power the plant. But now, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, your shipment gets cut back to 1,500 pounds of coal. What do? Well, if you're a good plant manager, you're doing two things. Number one, you're going to pull from your reserves the necessary amount to get to the 2,000 pounds of coal so that you can power the town. But you're also going to be on the phone to your suppliers, and you're going to be screaming at them, I need that 2,000 pounds of coal every day to meet needs, or else we're going to be in trouble. And if this 500 pounds of coal deficit continues for a long period of time, you're going to stop pulling from your reserves. And what you're going to do is you're going to call down to the town and say, guys, I can only burn 1,500 calories or 1,500 pounds of coal a day. So what we need to do is we just need to use less energy so that we can make this 1,500 pounds last. So turn off the lights. Maybe there's a curfew on lights, whatever it is that needs to happen. Well, your body is a lot like that coal plant. If you need 2,000 calories of energy to do all the things that you need to do in order to work your body, and you go on a diet and you cut that back to 1,500 calories a day, your body is going to work off of the reserves that you have packed away, which is this, right? Your body's going to work off that for a very short amount of time, which is why when you start a new diet, you lose weight, and it feels great. That first week, you lose 5 pounds, you lose 10 pounds, and this idea is so important to every fad diet you've ever been on in your life, because what do they all say? Lose 10 pounds in 10 days. Lose 20 pounds in 15 days. Lose 20 pounds in a month, whatever. Because they know that almost any change that you make to your diet will result in weight loss in the short term. Because if you eat less, and it doesn't even matter, you can eat less Twinkies. And as long as you're taking in less calories, your body will begin to pull from your reserves in order to pull up to make up the shortfall. But what happens? You've got a smart coal plant manager up in your head, and what happens is that the little guys up there, and they do this through hormones. So I'm anthropomorphizing these guys. So what they do is they do two things. Number one, they start screaming at you in order to get you to put more calories into your body. How do they do that? They tell you you're hungry. And so when you go on a calorie-reduced diet, you walk around hungry all the time. And that's because your body is saying, you're not giving us enough calories, you're not giving us enough food, we don't have the calories that we need in order to do the things that you want us to do, we're in trouble. So you walk around hungry all the time, but if you persist through that, then what happens is your body just starts shutting down the energy available to do all the things that it wants to do. So it starts shutting down energy to movement. That's like when I was doing the juice fast and I just sat around. That's what happened. My body reduced the amount of energy available for movement. I was lethargic. I was taking naps. I just didn't have the energy to be able to move. At one point, I didn't have the energy to move my arms because my body had restricted the number of calories that it was going to partition to movement. It will reduce the amount of calories to cognition. So you won't think as well. You don't think as well when you're on a calorie-restricted diet. You walk around muddle-headed. You know, things don't come to you as fast. It will reduce the number of calories to heat. Your hands will get cold, your feet will get cold, you'll be uncomfortable all the time, and it will also reduce the number of calories that's necessary to your mood. You're going to be in a bad mood all the time because you're constantly hungry. You know, because what's happening is your body, that smart coal plant manager in your head is putting the calories where it can do the most good, and really the most good is just keeping you alive. If you're not going to give it enough calories to do all the other things it wants to do, like make sure you think clearly, or make sure that you're well warmed, then fine, it's going to cut the calories of that, but it's going to continue to use the calories that you're giving it to, you know, pump your heart and do all the things that you need to do to live. Now let's go the other way. You're a coal plant manager, 2,000 pounds of coal to go power the town. All of a sudden, the demand from the town goes up. They want 2,500 pounds of coal in order to meet their new demand. You're a coal plant manager. What do? You get on the phone. You start screaming for your suppliers to up the supply runs to 2,500 pounds of coal. Well, that's what happens when you go on an exercise diet. Or an exercise diet. When you do vigorous exercise, you've increased the number of calories that your body wants to use, and so how does your body respond? It makes you hungrier. So that's why you go work out, and what happens as soon as you work out? You're hungry. You want to go eat some food. You want to replace those calories that you use. And so you have all these different forces working against you. And so if you want to try to lose weight by eating less and exercising more, it just doesn't work. So how do you lose weight? Well, here's the crazy thing about this, is we actually had this figured out as far back as the 1930s. Like, we knew exactly what drove weight gain and weight loss. The only problem was the people who figured it out was German scientists. They were on the cutting edge of obesity, of obesity science, basically, and they had this figured out. But before all this information was kind of disseminated to the general public, we had a little problem. We had World War II. And when World War II broke out, nobody wanted to hear anything that these German scientists had to say. They were blackballed. Nobody wanted to hear anything they had to say. And so the secret to how the body puts on pounds and takes pounds off was really kind of lost to the general scientific community until Dr. Atkins kind of reintroduced the idea in the 1970s. And even then, it took him a long time to get it to the point where it was a kind of a generally recognized idea. So the old method of understanding about when it came to your fat, the old method of understanding was that once fat was put away, so you've got extra fat around this middle, and once that fat was put away, it's basically in a long-term storage. So it's like a safety deposit box. So once the fat goes in, it stays there for a long, long time. That was the old way of thinking about fat. But what we now know is that's not what happens. What we now know is that once fat goes into a fat cell, as long as it stays in the form of fatty acid, these fatty acids can go in and out of fat cells all day. And in fact, they do. Your fatty acids go out of the fat cells, they travel around your body, the fatty acids are basically energy. So they power all the things that they need to power, and if there's any left over, by the time it makes a circuit, it goes right back into your fat cell. This is why you can sleep through the night and not have to get up at midnight for a midnight snack. Is because fatty acids are going in and out of your fat cells all night, and they're keeping you alive and giving you all the energy you need for all your metabolic processes, and generally good things are happening. It's also why when you wake up first thing in the morning, you're at your lightest, right? You've probably weighed yourself at night and then weighed yourself in the morning. You're like 3 pounds lighter in the morning. Well, how did that happen? Well, it happened because your body was using fuel in order to keep you alive through the night. Okay, so we've been told that glucose is the body's main energy source, or primary energy source, and that's not really true. The body actually doesn't prefer to use glucose. The body would actually prefer to run all of its processes on fatty acids, but it has to use the glucose first. And the reason why is that glucose is blood sugar, basically. So we're talking about glucose, we're talking about high levels of blood sugar that are in your veins. Your body knows that if you have chronically high elevated levels of blood sugar, that blood sugar will actually do damage to your body over time, right? So if you've got high blood sugar, if you've ever known anyone who has a type 1 diabetes and they get a little older and things aren't working right, well, the reason things aren't working right is usually a type 1 diabetic gets older is because the high levels of blood sugar that they have begins to break down the body. It causes cardiovascular disease, it causes kidney failure, it causes blindness. Usually, sometimes you have to get limbs amputated if you let it go on for long enough. Type 1 diabetes is not a fun disease, and it's certainly not anything you should be messing with. That's what's causing those issues, are these high levels of sugar. So your body knows that it cannot have high levels of sugar in your veins. It just can't, because it's going to hurt you long term. So the body does everything that it can do in order to use the glucose first, in order to use the blood sugar first, in order to power all the things that it needs to power. And only after all the glucose is finished, only then will it begin to turn its attention to the fatty acids in order to use those for fuel. So, so let's imagine that you're going to eat your normal meal, a normal dinner, and a normal dinner probably has all three of the macros. So fat, protein, and carbohydrates, those are the three main macros, and you're going to eat a meal with all three of these macros. So what happens when you eat this meal? The first thing to happen, well, not the first thing to happen, let's just take them one at a time. So protein. When you eat protein, your body digests the protein and it breaks it down into amino acids. And these amino acids are used for all of the different things that your body needs to use amino acids for. It rebuilds muscle tissues, it rebuilds ligaments. There's a ton of things that the body uses amino acids for. So all of those things are done with the protein that you ate. And then if you get, if the amino acids go throughout the body and your body uses as many of the amino acids as it can, but you have more left over, then the protein goes, the amino acids go to your kidneys, and they undergo a process called gluconeogenesis, and that's not going to be on the quiz. But what happens is the body treats those amino acids just like they were a carb. So for the rest of this talk, when I talk about carbs, know that I'm also talking about when you eat too much protein. Now, it can be difficult to eat too much protein, but just for the sake of completeness, I want to say that. So now you're going to eat, so we went to protein, fat. So now you're going to eat fat. The body breaks down fat into fatty acids, and the body can't do anything with those fatty acids yet because you've ate carbs at the same time. So in order to deal with the fatty acids, it's going to take those fatty acids and it's just going to throw them to the side and it's going to pack them away in your fat cells. And typically the fat cells around your midsection, around your liver, because the body wants to always have a ready supply of fat around your liver in case you get chased by a lion or something. It can break that fat down into energy and you have the energy to go up a tree or something. So this is why we tend to get fatter around the middle. And it's also why the fat that's around your middle does the most damage. So if you're fat in your arms, if you're fat in your chest, if you're fat in your legs, that's bad and it will cause long-term damage. But fat around the middle does by far, this is called adipose tissue, does by far the most damage. And it's the last fat that you lose. So basically you have to lose fat on all the other parts of your body first before you can get rid of the fat around your midsection. Isn't the body a wonderful, wonderful thing? So you eat the fat, it turns into fatty acids, and it just sets them aside because it can't deal with those until it deals with the carbs. So now you're going to eat carbs. What do the carbs do? You eat the carbs, and the carbs go to the liver, and they get broken down into glucose. Well, again, glucose is blood sugar. You can't have high levels of blood sugar just running free through your veins because it causes damage. So the body goes into almost a panicked mode in order to deal with the glucose, and what it does is it secretes insulin. So insulin is the hormone that we're going to spend the most of our time talking about today. So what insulin's job is to go grab the glucose and basically hold it by the hand and take it door to door to all the different cells of your body and knock on the cell doors and say, hey, do you need any energy? And the cells say, yes, we need energy. And it ushers the glucose into the cells so that the cells can use that glucose for energy. It'll go to the muscles and say, hey, do you need energy? And they'll either say, yes, we need some right now, or no, we don't need any right now, but we're probably going to need some energy in the very short future. So it'll actually store glucose in your muscle cells in the form of glycogen. And again, that's in case you get attacked by a tiger, your muscles have a quick source of energy that they can go climb up a tree or something. But you've eaten too many carbs. And so you've eaten more carbs than your cells can use for fuel. You've eaten too many carbs and can be stored away as fat, or stored away in your muscles. You've eaten too many carbs for your fat or for your muscles to use for energy. So your body can't have the glucose in the blood vein, in your blood vessels. So what does it do with it? There's only one other thing it can do with it, and that's to store it as fat. So the insulin goes to the fat cells, knocks on the door of the fat cell, and starts shoving glucose into your fat cells as fast as it can. Now, once it gets rid of all the glucose, and all the glucose, or most of the glucose, is out of your, all that glucose is out of your bloodstream, then your insulin levels can go down to work, which is to pull fatty acids out of your fat stores. That's how your body wants to work all the time. It just wants to pull energy from in and out of your fat stores and go from that. But every time you eat a carb, it interrupts this process, and it has to deal with the glucose from the carbs, right? So anybody, did I lose anyone? Because that's really important.
I have a question. Carbs are really important for your brain function.
You know what? Carbs are, let me get to that. Carbs are really important for your brain function, but you don't need very many. So if you ate the carbs from like a squash, that's enough to power your brain for the whole day. So you can eat a very, very small amount of, and that's where the carbs go first, is to your brain function. So you can eat very, very small amounts of carbs and your brain will be just fine. But honestly, your brain and every other cell in your body would prefer to run on fatty acids. So that's something called nutritional ketosis. We're not going to get into that today. But if your body would really, really prefer to just run on fat all the time. In fact, fat is your body's preferred energy source because fatty acids don't hurt you. You can have fatty acids rolling all over your body and they don't cause any long-term damage. But you can't say that about glucose. High levels of glucose cause all kinds of damage. Okay, so so now the insulin levels have fallen, the body can go back to pulling fatty acids in and out of the fat tissue for power. So what's going on here? Why does it seem like more fat is going into the fat cells than coming back out? If you are a normal American, you have gained 3 to 6 pounds every year for your entire life. That's the average. So if you were a healthy weight at 20, by the time you got to 30, you had an extra 30 pounds to lose. By the time you got to 40, you had on average maybe an extra 60 pounds to lose. And that's about the average, and that's what we're looking at now, and that's what's causing this obesity epidemic, is we're all gaining weight slowly and slowly and slowly over time. So what's happening? So before we get into exactly what's happening, we need to look at, there's 2 different kinds of fat. So the first one we've talked about extensively, the first one is fatty acids. Fatty acids are very, very small particles, and the reason that your body can use those for fuel is because they're small enough to go in and out of the fat cells that you have stored, and they can go into a fat cell, and they can go out of a fat cell, it's no big deal, they can they can go everywhere that they need to go, and that's what your body uses for energy. But when a fatty acid goes into a fat cell, and it gets in there with 2 other fatty acids, and a molecule of glucose, because remember the insulin has pushed glucose into the fat cell. What's formed is something called the triglyceride. So tri is 3, so it's 3 fatty acids. Glyceride is the glycerol molecule, and so you've got a triglyceride that's 3 fatty acids and a glucose molecule all kind of stuck together. Well, once that happens, once that fatty acid is trapped into the form of a triglyceride and that's stored away in your fat cells, that is long-term storage. Like, it's there. And it takes a lot of energy to start pulling triglycerides out of your fat cells. So your body will not break your triglycerides down in order for you to use as fuel until, number one, all of the glucose that you have in your bloodstream is used up, and then number two, all of the other fatty acids in your bloodstream are used up. So only after you use up the other two more easily gotten to forms of energy will your body even begin to mess with triglycerides. Well, what do most people eat? They get up in the morning, they have carbs for breakfast, and it's like toast and oatmeal. And then they have carbs for lunch and fat, and so it's like a sandwich. They eat a sandwich with carbs and fatty lunch meat. And then they have a mid-afternoon snack, and it's like chips or a candy bar and more fat and more sugar. And then they go home for dinner, and they have fat and carbs for their dinner, and it's like a steak and baked potato or rice or whatever. And then at night they have dessert, and it's a thing of ice cream or whatever. And so what happens is 4 or 5 times through the day you've fed your body fat and carbs at the same time. You have spiked your insulin, which has caused your body to store fat and not pull the fat out of your storage. And not only have you forced your body to gain weight the whole day because you've kept your insulin levels high, but you've never given your body a chance to start pulling fat out of the long-term storage and start breaking down those triglycerides into energy that you can use, because your body doesn't want to break down those triglycerides until you need it. And as long as your glucose levels are high, as long as your fatty acid levels are high, as long as you have ready access to other types of energy, it's never going to happen. Your triglycerides are there to stay. Pardon me. So in fact, you can think of triglycerides as a big piece of furniture. So you've got a bed in the bedroom that you need to move into the living room for whatever reason. Well, you can't get it out of the bedroom until you totally take it apart and then move it in, move it out piece by piece and then put it back together in the other room. That's basically what happened with triglycerides. So they've taken the fatty acids apart and then put them into your fat cells piece by piece, but once they're in there, it's like a big piece of furniture. It's just stuck, and you get fatty. And that's the idea. So anything that pushes fatty acids and glucose into a fat cell makes you fatter. And anything that goes in and grabs those triglycerides and breaks them down and pulls them back out and reintroduces them into the bloodstream makes you thinner. That's the big idea. So if you can just kind of get that truth in your head, so your weight loss is not dependent on you eating less and exercising more. It's dependent on you doing the things that cause your triglycerides to be broken down for fuel and brought out into the bloodstream for fuel. So what do we need to understand in order for that to happen? And to understand that, we have to look at insulin. So insulin is the villain of the story. Insulin is what's causing you to gain weight slowly but surely every year of your life. Insulin's job, just like I said, is to go and to make sure that every cell in your body has all the power it needs in order to do all the things that it does. And it concentrates first and foremost on the glucose. So it makes everything use the glucose first, and then only then are you going to deal with the fatty acids that are stored away. And to do this, it has to use 2 different proteins or 2 different enzymes. Now this part of the talk, just so you guys know, this is where I nerd out. This is a little bit of sciencey stuff. This is the stuff that I really, really enjoy. This is stuff that I look forward to learning. So this is very, very important to me. So if I start talking about this and I lose you a little bit, don't worry. I'm going to bring it all back at the end. But it's this science stuff that really, really, really drives my passion in order to help people lose weight. Okay? So there are 2 different enzymes that cause, or that insulin uses to deal with the fat. So the first one is LPL, or lipoprotein lipase. So what LPL does, if you can imagine your fat cell as a ball like this, what LPL does is it sticks a hook out, just like this, on the surface of your fat cell. And what that hook does is say, hey, we need glucose or we need fatty acids or whatever. And then the bloodstream brings by some glucose, and it grabs a hold of glucose and it brings it in, or grabs a hold of fatty acid and it brings it in. So if that fat cell needs a lot, like you've really emptied it because you've done a lot of exercise or whatever. So if that fat cell has a lot of need, it'll bring out a lot of hooks, and those LPL enzymes will start grabbing a lot of the glucose and a lot of the fatty acids, start pulling them into the individual fat cells. So anything that drives LPL activity makes you fatter. Well, what drives LPL activity? It's insulin. The higher the levels of insulin in your bloodstream, the more LPL hooks come out on the surface of the fat cell, the more fatty acids and the more glucose molecules get pulled into the fat cells, and the fatter you get. And if you pull in 3 fatty acids and a glucose molecule, and they're all sitting in the same that are all sitting in the same fat cell, it turns into triglyceride, and now it's there and it's stuck. You can't really do anything. It's just there for forever. Not forever. We'll talk about that, but it's there for a long, long time. And LPL activity is also what drives where you get fat. So for women, women have go through puberty, and what do? They start getting their curves, they start getting hips, they start getting a rear end, they start getting a chest. And what's happening is in those areas of your body, your LPL activity begins to awaken and begins to increase in those areas of the body. And after puberty is over, it doesn't stop. So if you got, say, a big chest at puberty, your chest is just going to get bigger as you gain weight throughout your life. If you got big hips, you're going to have bigger hips as you go through life, and a bigger rear end, and those things just get bigger because there's already a lot of LPL activity in those areas. For men, it's their gut. That's generally where they gain weight. And that's definitely where I gained weight. But also you get it, obviously in your face and all kinds of different places. The body, once you get to a certain point, the body just starts putting fat everywhere and just doing everything it can to store it because it can't have it just roaming free in the bloodstream, and you've eaten it, so it's got to do something with it. And that's why we have double chins and, fatty arms and big thighs and, everything gets fat, and it's because your body's just packing fat away. But where that fat goes is driven primarily by the LPL enzyme. So again, what drives LPL activity is insulin. But the other enzyme, the hero of the story, the one that we like, the one that does the opposite of LPL is HSL. And that stands for hormone-sensitive lipase. So the job of HSL is to go into a fat cell, grab a triglyceride, break it apart into its component parts, and bring it out of the fat cell, reintroduce it to the bloodstream, and let your body use that for fuel. So HSL is the hero of the story. Anything that you could do to increase your HSL activity is going to make you thinner. So this is what we need to look at. But here's the kicker. What stops HSL activity? Insulin. The higher your insulin levels, the more dormant your HSL enzymes become. So the higher insulin levels, the more your fat stays stored away in long-term storage of triglycerides. So the key, really, to weight loss is to control your insulin levels, to eat foods that suppress your insulin levels as much as possible. But here's the crazy thing, is the more science that we've done on this, the more that we've realized that many of the diseases of civilization, those things that we get, those diseases that we get because we are able to survive long enough to get them, a lot of those diseases are driven by chronically high levels of insulin. So let's start with the most obvious one, type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is driven by chronically high levels of insulin. So if you have, my wife had type 2 diabetes, if you can lower your insulin levels and not eat foods that require your body to secrete insulin levels, you can get rid of type 2 diabetes. I know people who have had type 2 diabetes for decades. And once they stop eating foods that cause an insulin response, they come off of their insulin, their pancreas function is restored, and it's like a miracle cure. Now, let me say this, that I'm not a doctor, I don't make any promises of curing diabetes, obviously, but I do know that this helps and that this will increase your chances of getting rid of type 2 diabetes.
And in case you didn't know, type 1 and type 2 are completely different. Type 1,
Yeah, type 1 is,
that's your body.
you can't cure that.
But type 2, I had type 2 diabetes, I lost the weight, and the doctors say I no longer have it.
Yeah.
So, it's
so let's talk about another one, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. We now know that PCOS is nothing more than long-term insulin resistance in the ovaries. So that if you can start reducing the amount of insulin that is present in your bloodstream, your PCOS can be reversed or even cured. Increased VLDL. So you've heard all of your life that HDL is good cholesterol and LDL is bad cholesterol. Well, what we now know is that's not actually true. HDL is good cholesterol, and most types, so LDL is a broad spectrum of different particle sizes. Most types of LDL are benign. They just do their job, and if they're high, if they're low, it doesn't really mean anything. But the LDL that actually does damage to you is VLDL, very low density lipoproteins. These are the cholesterol particles that actually hurt you. Well, what causes VLDL particles? It's eating foods that cause an insulin response. So grains, sugars, Those increase your instance of VLDL.
Michael's will be giving away.
Oh, sorry. My first name is Michael, so every time she says it, it makes me nervous.
So if you
Um,
have not
So it
already
increases your,
registered
okay,
for
I got 15 minutes, right?
Please do so. Again, we'll be giving
Okay,
away.
it's 5:30, right? I'm not, okay.
At 5.
So increase VLDL, high blood pressure. High blood pressure is driven by high insulin levels. Cardiovascular disease is driven by high insulin levels. Alzheimer's, many doctors now call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes because the same root causes that cause type 2 diabetes, when those circumstances are in someone for decades, then it will lead to an increased risk of Alzheimer's. If you'd like to read more about this, because this is a fascinating subject and this is really cutting edge stuff, there's a book it's by Dr. David Perlmutter, and in just a minute that link is going to have a link to the book, but it's called by Dr. Perlmutter called Brain Brain, and it's a fascinating book. It's a fascinating look at what brain does to the human brain over time, and I swear, if you read that book, you will never eat another sandwich again for the rest of your life. Macular degeneration, so high blood sugars will make you go blind. So before we move on, I do need to say this. Some people, and we all know these people, and we hate these people, can seem to eat anything and not gain weight. My son is one of these people. My son, if I ate like my son ate, I would be 400 pounds again by the end of the week. He's Dr. Pepper with every meal. It's all carbs, all sugar, all the time, and he'll never gain a pound. So some people, we call these people ectomorphs, and that's kind of a fancy name for people that don't really tend to gain weight. Well, those people exist. There's just nothing you can do about them. But it's very comparable to tobacco and lung cancer. So not everyone who smokes tobacco will get lung cancer, but if you smoke tobacco, your risk of getting lung cancer increases dramatically. In fact, if tobacco didn't exist, lung cancer would really kind of be a rare disease. So in the same way, not everyone who eats a bunch of carbs and a bunch of sugar will gain weight, but if you do eat a bunch of carbs and a bunch of sugar and keep your insulin levels high, your risk of all these diseases, including obesity, skyrocket. In fact, we call these people TOFIs. T-O-F-I, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, because a lot of times as they get older, they get all of the other metabolic problems that come with high sugar consumption. So they have high cholesterol, they have high blood pressure, they have cardiovascular disease. They just don't get the weight, which that's fine. So, what do you eat? What do you eat to avoid all these issues? Well, you've probably got most of this figured out. When it comes to carbs, don't eat carbs. Or eat as small an amount of carbs as possible, and all of your carbs should come from like green leafy vegetables, other types of vegetables. You want to stay away from carbs that your body can very, very quickly break down into glucose. So like, don't eat grains, don't eat sugar, don't eat potatoes, because potatoes are just pure starch and your body can convert those to sugar real quick. Don't eat those foods that cause a high insulin response very, very quickly, and you're going to keep your insulin levels low. Well, what about protein? Well,